Hello friends, today we're talking about underlying competencies that are needed for a business analyst. Let's start with a quick introduction. Let me take you through what should you expect as a part of this video. In this video today, we will cover an overview of the 6 underlying competencies in line with the Babok. We will have a detailed explanation of the first competency with some really fun examples, and we will look at the weightage of underlying competencies from an ECBA, Ccba and Cbap point of view. My name is Gauri. I am Ccba certified, that is Certification of Capability in Business Analysis. Additionally, I also hold certifications in CSPO, CSM and POPM. I am really passionate about IoT platforms and I primarily work in the water and renewable space. So, let's get started. If we talk about underlying competencies as an overview, we're talking about behaviors, characteristics, knowledge, and personal qualities that you and I as business analysts have. And if we were to talk about it a little further, we will talk about first, we need analytical thinking and problem solving. Second, we're talking about behavioral characteristics. Third, we're talking about business knowledge. Fourth, communication skills. Fifth, interaction skills. And last but definitely not the least, the tools and technology that we need to use as BAs. So today we will talk about the first underlying competency, which is analytical thinking and problem solving. So basically, analytical thinking and problem solving relies on how do we utilize opportunities effectively. How do we identify which changes must be delivered, what is the maximum value that the stakeholders can derive from it, and also understand the impact it will have on changes. It comprises of 6 sub-competencies: critical thinking, learning, system thinking, visual thinking, conceptual thinking, problem solving, and decision making. We are now going to talk about each of these with some really fun examples. Let's get started. So have you heard about the story called Our Iceberg is Melting? This is a book by John Kotter and Kotter, which relies or really talks about changing and succeeding under any condition. The book is based on some penguins in Antarctica, and our penguin over here called Fred is really the hero of our story. Let's make use of Fred and understand underlying competencies, analytical thinking and problem solving. So Fred was a watcher. Fred was an observer. Fred always looked at the sea to understand how things were going, while all other penguins were busy living their own life. None of the images in this video belong to me. They're all from the book, a copy of which I have. So credits go to the authors and the publishers out there. Used purely for representational purpose. Let's start with the first underlying competency under analytical thinking and problem solving. We're going to talk about creative thinking. So you would often see Fred across this video as the penguin with the suitcase, and all others are his friends and his community folks. So as the title suggests, the iceberg of these penguins was melting, and Fred was really worried because he had been observing it. But the other penguins were not really in or did not feel the same. They were not willing to believe him. So Fred really wanted to prove his point. What Fred did was, Fred took a glass bottle, filled it with water, corked it and left it overnight. Then all the penguins returned the next morning. They saw the bottle to be broken. On thinking about it, Fred explained how the water had been expanding and contracting resulting in the breakage of the bottle, and something similar was happening around with their iceberg. So if we think over here, Fred applied creative thinking. But let's talk about it in terms of business analysis. If we expand what Fred did as our BA over here, let's talk about creative thinking. We'll talk in terms of what, why, and how do I do it. So creative thinking involves generating new ideas and concepts, as well as finding new ways or different ways to associate between existing ideas or concepts as well. Why do we do it? We do this because this helps us as BAs to be effective in generating new ideas, approaches, or even some alternatives to problem-solving opportunities. How do we do it? So in order to sort of use creative thinking and implement it, think about generating and productively considering new ideas and concepts. Are you as a person able to generate new ideas and concepts? Can you explore the existing ideas and concepts? Can you think of changes in them? Are you able to generate creativity for yourself as well as for other people? Are you good at applying ideas to resolve existing problems? If you answered a yes to most of these, you are definitely a creative thinker. Well, our story continues. Let's go back to Antarctica. The next thing we're going to talk about is decision making. So what's happening with Fred and his folks in the community is that they did realize that their iceberg is melting. They do have substantial problems around their living. But now what do they do? Some decision needs to be made. Well, as BAs, there are going to be a lot of spaces where we also need to make decisions or help make decisions. So it's another important competency for us to have. So Fred had been conversing with other penguins on the iceberg, talking about what had happened. He was pondering of what could be done. But penguins being penguins, a lot of them were worried. Think of these as our stakeholders as well, right? There would be folks who come back to us and say, why does this need to happen with me? Some people might be the absolute complainers. There must be people who do not like us. In this case, there's a penguin who does not like Fred at all. And then there could be people who are really anxious about what's happening. There could be people in absolute denial to say our iceberg is not melting at all. And then there were some who were really worried, what if the iceberg explodes? But my dear friends, a decision has to be made, whether we like it or not. So, what happens when your decision needs to be made? Well, when a decision needs to be made, we as BAs are involved in analyzing the relevant information. We can make comparisons, think of trade-offs, but ensure that the most desirable optimum solution or conclusion is reached. Why do we do it? We do this because it helps us understand the criteria for making a decision, and also it helps to make better decisions in turn. How do we go about decision making? First, ensure that you have appropriate stakeholders represented. All your power users, all your key stakeholders need to be part of this process. Ensure that the stakeholders understand the decision-making process and the rationale behind it. Why are we doing this? Why is this change important? Why is this trade-off needed? The pros and cons of all available options should be clearly communicated to the stakeholders. So think of it as having an absolute transparent ground for everyone to work with. The decision-making also helps to reduce uncertainty, as well as accept any uncertainty that is remaining out of the decisions made. And a decision also helps to address any opportunities we have in hand in the best interest of all stakeholders. Finally, of course, a decision needs to be made. If you answered a yes to most of these questions, remember that you have great decision-making skills. And finally, you would also be able to make a decision or help make a decision. So let's go back to Antarctica and see where Fred and our friends are. Learning. That brings us to our third underlying competency, learning. Well, these penguins had been living on this particular iceberg all their life. Now, knowing that the iceberg is melting, some were really anxious about it. Some were really excited to do something about it. Some thought it was an opportunity. We never do anything new. This has to be interesting. This is an opportunity to try something. Let's not just talk, let's do something. So there was a group which is absolutely eager to learn and try and do something new. So why do you and I as BAs or product owners or digital product managers need to be learning? For a few simple reasons. Learning is a process by which we can gain knowledge and skills. And basically we can think of it in stages. A stage where we acquire the knowledge, second where we learn to apply it, and third where we are able to analyze, synthesize and evaluate the knowledge. Why do we need it? It helps us to work effectively in the changing environments. And basis our learning techniques, we could either be visual learners, folks who learn by looking at things. We could be auditory learners, folks who learn by hearing. Or we could be kinesthetic learners, folks who learn by doing. How do you go about improving your learning skills? Learning the concepts initially and then demonstrating how you have understood them. Also, the ability to apply the concepts in newer areas or any new relationships with them. We should be able to rapidly absorb facts, concepts, and opinions, and also be able to present them. Are we able to ideate? Are we able to discover? Are we able to share our thoughts or our learnings? If you were able to do any of those, remember you have great learning skills. Let's go back to Fred and our penguins in Antarctica, who by now have thought of creative thinking, have sort of understood the problem and know that they need to make a decision, are willing to learn as well. So the penguins learned to fish. The penguins learned to go out of their comfort zone and start with a new life. So let's see which competency are they on to next. Problem solving. Well, the iceberg was melting, sure, but what needs to be done about it? They did not want to die living there on that particular iceberg. So, while they were discussing, they saw a seagull flying. And one penguin thought, maybe nomadic life is a way. Maybe we don't need to have a fixed home. Maybe we could have a free home and be like the seagulls and learn from them. So they had a problem which was about the iceberg melting. But now looking at the seagull, they also thought about a solution of having a nomadic life. So let's see what happened with our penguins next, and to us as BAs as well. Let's come to problem solving. Why do we need problem solving and what do we even do as a part of it? So problem solving involves understanding the underlying root cause of a problem. Also helping the stakeholders understand and to know and ensure that whatever is the solution, it helps address the root cause of the problem as well. So be a problem solver than a problem maker. But why would we do this? We often assume a lot of things in our work, but it is important to identify the assumptions and validate them. Also look for any alternative solutions. Remember how you always think of a plan B, C, or D? Have that even in your business analysis approach. How do you go about problem solving? First, have confidence of the participants in the process itself. Ensure everyone understands what is the problem and what are you even trying to solve. Second, ensure that the selected solution meets the objectives and you actually are solving the root cause to which you had arrived earlier. Look at any new solution options that you have. Try to evaluate them. See if some frameworks work around it. Also look at any kind of unvalidated assumptions, any preconceived notions that could make your solution less compelling to your stakeholders. If you were able to do one or more of those, remember that you have great problem solving skills as well. But let's go back to Antarctica and see where Fred and our friends are at. Let's talk about systems thinking with that. So as we said, Antarctica was the home for these penguins all their life. This is where they just knew how life was and how did they go about life. So what is systems thinking in this particular case? Well, systems thinking in our case, where our friends are, they were finding it really difficult to move out. And who said it was going to be easy? And there were some who were really optimistic about moving to a different place. There were some who really wanted to just be here because this was their home. So what is systems thinking in this particular scenario? When we think about systems thinking, we are really talking about people, processes, and technologies within an organization. Why are we thinking about it? Because people, processes, and technology are the properties that make up a system. The behaviors, the characteristics, how do we interact with different components? It's important because every change that we make could impact someone, a person, a process, or a technology. So how do we go about systems thinking? Ensure that you communicate how the change affects the system as a whole. Also ensure how you communicate about the system changes and the environment that it's going to impact. Think about how we are going to adapt as well to the internal or external pressures and changes. In this case, the iceberg was melting, everyone was willing to look for a home, but there was some inertia around it, right? So systems thinking would involve about thinking about the entire iceberg in this particular case and thinking about how do you go about it now. If you demonstrate some or any of those, remember that you have great systems thinking as well. Let's go to conceptual thinking and back to Fred and Antarctica. So there were some penguins who were having nightmares earlier, but were really looking forward to it. There were these tiny kids who were looking at the seagull and were really happy. And there were other penguins who were really exploring life to see how bad was the iceberg really getting. So what was conceptual thinking over here? Conceptual thinking is the ability to link different contexts, solutions, needs of the stakeholders and the value as well. It's about the big picture as a whole. So as the iceberg was melting, the penguins were willing to look at the big picture and were willing to solve their problem as well. Why do we need this? We need this because it helps us apply our past experiences, knowledge, and take it into an abstract level of thinking, which is not usually easily possible. So think of it, how do you look at the big picture? Where do your modules fit in? With conceptual thinking, you will be able to abstract and imagine and look at the bigger picture. How do you do this? So if you have systems which need connection because information is lying in silos, you go about building relationships for them. You look at how well your stakeholders have understood the concept. Do they feel confident about it? And confirm it with the stakeholders as well. Look at abstract ideas which combine your information and also look at the uncertainty that comes with it. Draw from your past experiences because all of us have this amazing reserve of learning since our childhood. So just bring it back to your work environment as well. Again, if you did any of those, remember that you're really great at conceptual thinking. And that also brings to the last part of our analytical thinking and problem solving competency, which is visual thinking. So what is visual thinking? Well, when the penguins were not willing to believe Fred or could not really gauge how big the problem was, Fred used a glass bottle. Fred just put some water into it and left it overnight and helped people see what really happened. Visual thinking is something on similar lines. Do you have the ability to communicate complex concepts and models into understandable representation? Do you know how to make it easy? Why would you do this? Because it helps to keep the stakeholders engaged and connected. It could help to absorb things better. How do you go about it? Well, the complex information can be put into a visual model which can be understood by stakeholders. We could help increase the productivity with all of this because it's going to be faster absorption, quick retention as well. The stakeholders are going to be engaged to a deeper level and not just text over here. So we're talking about graphics, we're talking about presentations, we're talking about different modes of rendering a similar information. Also, critical information will not get missed, which typically when we end up putting big paragraphs is lost in translation. Well, that brings us to an end of what is covered under underlying competencies. This is very much in line with Babok. So this video could also help you complete your underlying competencies module through Babok. Let's talk about what is the weightage for ECBA, Ccba and Cbap in the hope that you are planning to appear for the certification. In ECBA, underlying competencies have a weightage of 5%. For Ccba, underlying competencies overall feature in different questions where you need to make a decision. And in Cbap as well, you will find underlying competencies overall again across different modules. So it is about how are you as a BA and how are you able to apply your underlying competencies across different areas. Well, my dear friends, thank you for watching. Thank you for hearing. At the end of this, let's figure out if you are a visual learner or an auditory one or a kinesthetic. And let me know for any questions in the comments. I'd be super happy to reach out and answer any of those to you. Thank you.